I believe that waste is a mindset. When I was really young, my mum would often teach me a phrase. It was called gar gasar. Gar is from the Sanskrit root, kri, and we're quite familiar with other words like karma that come from the same root. Gar gasar is like being concerned. I was a really naughty kid, and I remember that I would get detention after school. And for that detention, the school would give me a punishment to go around the playground and pick up litter. I was a litter buster. And as part of this deal of carrying a bag and an elongated arm, I used to pick up pieces of rubbish, and at the back of it would be, "Make Britain tidy." It had a huge impact on me. Later on, I got a little bit better. I wasn't so naughty at high school. And then somehow I made it to university. And in my economics degree, I started to really get deeper into the concepts of what the scarcity of resources actually meant. I didn't believe in that. It was actually only 9 years later, when I was invited to Bhutan by the Queen Mother, that I came across a completely different measure of success. That was called Gross National Happiness Index. And in 2011, exactly a year later, we presented the World Happiness Report at the UN. Replenish was a word that I kept on coming back to. And it's the word that I'd like to translate from Gargasar to English. Replenish is a philosophy. It is a philosophy of giving more than you're taking. Later that year, I was invited by the Center of Environment Planning and Technology to collaborate with them and to do some research on smart cities. India's got 100 smart cities, and CEPT is at the forefront of that research. And whilst I was invited there was something really bizarre about that photograph behind me. It's normal. Young gentleman sitting on a bamboo, probably singing Bollywood songs, and completely oblivious to what's behind him. Waste is normal. It was this that really shocked me. And I would often see on the side of the streets more informal landfill sites than formal landfill sites. People would run to new trash being delivered to landfill sites like rats. But I had a moment, and that was in understanding that I think we need to question the philosophy upon which we design our existence. This post-war mentality of acquiring more material wealth, regardless of the environmental impact, is actually at the core of what we need to understand for future generations. In India, that moment came for me when I was in a rickshaw and I was sitting at the back, minding my own business, had a scarf over my mouth because of the air pollution, and I actually just stopped on the side, and I saw a cow, and it was reaching down to pick up a piece of plastic, and it was chewing the piece of plastic because it could smell food on the plastic. Little did I know that moment I would never, ever forget. And it was that moment where the cow was eating this plastic, I realized that how much more plastic is this cow going to eat? Later on, I had some research done, and actually bricks of this plastic stop the cows from digesting, and often they die. We'd taken it way too far. And in India, where you walk through the streets, it really makes you wonder what this GDP as a measure of success actually really is. It doesn't factor in long-term implications or the consequences to the future availability of these resources. 93% of the coral reef at the Great Barrier is bleached, and it's not going to come back. It's almost every day there is a species that is extinct. And our land and oceans are filled with waste, like this great Pacific gyre. Wally. Do you think he looked up at the beautiful sky at night and wondered about, that space is congested with decommissioned satellites and debris? Probably not. I think what's worse is that there's not one person, one community, or a country that is responsible. And yet governments and academics, and really reputable individuals, ignore the fact that our global commons are suffering. We fuel mass production and grow resource allocation as if, we've got no care in the world. It will keep on going. It's a very short-term mentality. And it doesn't allow us to understand the limits to our growth. Actually, it encourages us to consume more. By coincidence, I was in the National Institute of Design, again in 2015, and I came across two lovely ladies, completely by chance. We were having a conversation. I mean, this piece of art is part of that conversation of landscapes and how art can impact us. This in particular is looking at John Trumbull's romantic landscape. What I realized was that visual inspiration has a huge impact on us, and our environment is actually something that can make us who we are. So what does the visual inspiration of these places that I see, of informal landfill sites, what are they doing to me? I think I've walked through the different streets of about 75 plus countries. Those who know me know that I travel quite a bit. And I get inspired when I walk through the streets of many different cities. But in India, I was getting really depressed. And it was only till I met these women, Mudita and Ishika, that I felt that I had some hope. And it was the beginning of the Replenish team. Later that year, in December, I was invited after the Smart Cities research at CEPT to teach a course. And it was going to be called Replenish Smart Cities, because they wanted smart cities and I wasn't going to do it on its own. What is smart in the end, right? And it was actually this pushback that I got from the students, because I suggested we should go to Abu Dhabi, we should go to see Masdar City, we should go to Bhutan. And the students gathered around and said, "Ma'am, do we have to go to Bhutan? It's right next to our country. Can't we go to London?" And I said, "No, we can't go to London. I want to take you to Bhutan." And actually, what was really surprising was that having seen the tallest tower in the world, at the end of the course, the students turned to me and they said that Bhutan was the most impressive thing that they'd ever seen. We were actually sitting in a bus. We were coming from Paro directly to Thimphu. And on the bus, I was kind of snoozing away. And I just remember it halting, and I thought it was an emergency. All the students had run off the bus. And once they'd run off the bus, I started to run off the bus thinking, I don't know what's happened. Little did I know that on the little highway next to the river, the students were actually taking selfies of themselves with the clear water. They had never seen such clean water in their lives. This was the power of a lived experience, something that no textbook could have taught them. After the success of the first course, I ended up teaching a second course, and this time I took my students to Japan. Japan is the ideal when it comes to resource efficiency, and not just that. I gave the students a culture shock. I really wanted to put them into the middle of learning how to recycle, because they don't do that at home in India. And it was in Japan, when they were living in these homestays, that they started to realize rentai sekinin in Japanese is community responsibility. And at the moment when they were leaving Japan, this is another image from Iwaki, where the students learnt about resource cycles. And it was actually the profundity of that change around us that suggests that we've really gone too far. And perhaps navigating a different course isn't going to be possible. Maybe we're going to lead to mass neurosis. Perhaps unemployment and poverty are really on the agenda. But I don't think this is the time for unconscious evolution. I think it's time that we manage this change and we master the multitude of futures that we have in front of us. I'm going to ask you a question. Thanks. Which part of the planet is it okay for us to hide waste? Can we put it underneath your seat? Do you think we can put all the rubbish outside of this building and nobody would notice it? Which part of the planet is it okay for us to hide waste? Do you think waste is human? Because we seem to treat it like that. We burn it, cremate, we bury it, We haven't quite figured out a way of sending it out to space, but perhaps that's next. I think we have tremendous methods to distribute waste around the world. You don't have to go that far. Just go to MIT Media Labs and you'll see Carlo Ratti's work on how rubbish goes from North America all the way to Thailand. It's really impressive. Are we leading to a wasteland, like Peter Bruegel depicted in this image? Or can a resource be reincarnated? About 3,000 years ago, in India, we began seeking answers to philosophical questions. It was about 150 years ago we turned to science. Cosmo Sapiens, a book authored by John Hands, really talks about the Big Bang Theory for the origin of the matter and energy of which we ultimately consist. But he says it's contradicted by observational evidence. Cosmologists, he says, fail to account for about 95% of the universe. The central idea is untestable and hence unscientific. Richard Dawkins popularizes neo-Darwinism in his very, very famous book, The Selfish Gene. But he too is contradicted by 21st century evidence, and he too has realized that this is a belief system that is being created. What's massively different about us is our reflective consciousness. In evolutionary lineage leading to humans, consciousness rises to the point that it becomes conscious of itself. We're the only known species that not only knows, but knows that it knows. And this evolution is noetic. It's an evolution of the mind. It's time that we develop a system that moves us to mindful consumption. And yes, these kabadiwalas in India in scrapyards are doing a great job. They're collectors and sorters and connectors and traders. And this place in Memnagar is a scrap market in Ahmedabad. And they do a brilliant job. Yes, there's steps. And yes, we can really go to a place where we can create this evolutionary step. But I think what's really needed is an entrepreneurial shift to consider sustainability at the inception of a business, as a forethought, not an afterthought. What if we were to launch the Replenish Business Canvas? We did so in MIT last year. This was really to question businesses right at the beginning, at the startup stages, to understand what it was that they would have an impact on in the long term. Within about 2 months or so, the Indian Institute of Management picked it up, and after that, about 9 other universities under the A-League were really excited about accelerating the theme Replenish, and the business canvas has been used by them through their entrepreneurship education to raise awareness about this important theme. I think startups will evolve to capture larger markets of demand, to create goods and services that will help us live in harmony with nature. And that will lead to current businesses remaining competitive and learning what it is that's needed. We need to be widely distributing a lot of this education to teachers as well, so they can be at the cutting edge of this education in business. In the short term, of course, we can upcycle, we can design using circular design. And, Basaramas, playgrounds are a good example of that. Even the Swedish, importation of waste around the world is a great example for the short term. Perhaps a success factor is using community architecture 2.0, where it's really taking understanding from and academic research from UCL's Institute of Sustainable Resources, where they can actually map out ecosystem services as an index. I think developing this will require access to a number of different organizations, and these will filter in that knowledge. Yes, it's not perfect. No, it's not accurate either, but it's a step. We're asking for your support to protect the global commons and to share the philosophy of Replenish. In October, we're going to be at the Story of Space. It's an art residency. It's going to be in Goa. I would love to see you there. Actually, in January this year, we launched the Replenish speaker series. This is really to get an understanding of what kind of business models have been successful and to inspire our audience to share those. They do exist. In the medium term, we've supported rural urban development, where in Surat, for example, we're piloting different schemes to then reach out to about 300 different villages around this city, where we can trial out different sustainable urban development. Sean Yoro's work is really exceptional. It's where he paints on sort of, these melting ice caps, and he shows us the importance of time. Money saved should really be put into these replenished reserves around the world. And I really do think that advertising tools, if we go back in time to Edward Bernays and his PR work, we can really learn the kind of cultural, artistic context of his work to really begin a dialogue and perhaps even lead to crazy actions like this gentleman in China hoovering up the air pollution. So, why do we only ever add new words to dictionaries? Perhaps it's time we removed waste. Thank you.